The air in our house had grown thin, stretched taut with unspoken resentments that felt entirely one-sided. For weeks, every conversation with my husband, Mark, seemed to circle back to my upcoming hysterectomy. He never called it by its name. To him, it was always the procedure, that expensive surgery, or, his personal favorite, this whole ordeal. He spoke of my health not with concern, but with the weary tone of a man discussing a leaky roof or a failing transmission, an inconvenient and costly problem he was being forced to deal with. This morning was no different. I was sitting at our polished kitchen island, nursing a cup of chamomile tea and trying to ignore the dull, persistent ache in my abdomen. Mark strode in, already dressed in his crisp suit, a stark contrast to my worn-out bathrobe. He didn't kiss my head or ask how I was feeling. Instead, he slapped a stack of mail onto the granite countertop. A single white envelope from the hospital's billing department lay on top. "Another one, Clara," he said with a heavy sigh, nudging it toward me with his index finger. "I just don't see how we're going to absorb all this. My commission this quarter wasn't what I'd hoped. We should have gone with the cheaper surgeon." I flinched, wrapping my hands tighter around my mug. Dr. Evans was the best in the state. My own research, done late at night when the pain kept me awake, had led me to her. Mark had wanted me to go to a clinic with a spotty record simply because it was 20% cheaper. "Mark, we discussed this. Dr. Evans is the only one who can perform it laparoscopically. The recovery time is so much shorter." "Shorter, but not cheaper," he shot back, opening the refrigerator to grab a bottle of orange juice. He didn't pour it into a glass. He just chugged it straight from the container, his eyes fixed on me over the top. It was a small, proprietary act that always made me feel like a guest in my own home. It's a lot, Clara. This whole thing is a lot. On me." I felt that familiar, sinking feeling, the guilt he was so adept at instilling. For 10 years, I had made myself smaller to make him feel big. I'd given up my career in art restoration to support his ambitions in finance. I handled every domestic detail so he could focus on climbing the corporate ladder. When my own body failed me, the one time I needed support, I had become a liability, a line item on his budget. As he set the bottle down with a thud, his eyes scanned my face. "And don't even think about calling your family," he warned, his voice low and sharp. "I'm not taking a dime of their handout money. We handle our own problems." He meant my family. My mother's family, the Astors, were from old East Coast money. I'd become estranged from them after my mother's death, partly due to my father's pride and partly due to my own youthful desire to escape the gilded cage of their expectations. Mark knew this, and he'd always painted them as condescending snobs who looked down on him. In truth, I hadn't spoken to my maternal grandfather in over a decade. The thought of calling him for help was humiliating, a confirmation of Mark's narrative that I was incapable of surviving without a safety net. "I wasn't going to," I whispered, looking down into my tea. "Good," he said, grabbing his briefcase. "I'll take you to the hospital tomorrow morning. Try to have everything ready to go. I can't be late for my afternoon meeting." He walked out without another word. The front door clicked shut, leaving me alone in the silent, immaculate house that had started to feel more like a showroom than a home. The ache in my belly intensified, a painful echo of the hollowness in my heart. The hospital room was a sterile white box, bleached of all personality and warmth. The only sounds were the soft, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor next to my bed and the frantic tapping of Mark's thumbs on his phone. He was perched on the uncomfortable visitor's chair, his leg bouncing with an impatient energy that filled the small space with anxiety. He hadn't looked at me, truly looked at me since we'd arrived. A kind-faced nurse named Brenda had just finished inserting my IV. Her touch was gentle, her smile genuine. "There you go, sweetie. All set. The anesthesiologist will be in shortly to talk you through everything. Are you feeling okay?" A little nervous, I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "That's perfectly normal," she said, patting my hand. "You're in the very best hands with Dr. Evans." She glanced over at Mark, who remained engrossed in his phone. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Your husband can wait here for you. The surgery should take about 2 hours, and then another hour or so in recovery." "Thank you, Brenda," I said, grateful for her warmth. As she left, the silence descended again, broken only by Mark's agitated sigh. "Is the Wi-Fi in this place a joke? I can't even load these quarterly reports." I stared at the ceiling, at the perforated white tiles, and counted them. 1, 2, 3. Anything to keep the tears from forming. He was right here, inches away from me, and I had never felt more alone. My body was about to be cut open, parts of me removed forever, and his primary concern was the internet speed. "Mark," I said softly, my voice barely a whisper, Could you maybe put the phone away, just for a minute?" He looked up, his expression one of pure annoyance, as if I'd asked him to solve a complex calculus problem. "Clara, I'm trying to get work done. I'm taking the whole day off for this, you know? Things don't just stop at the office because you had to have this done." Have to have this done. Not "we are going through this," not "I am here for you." It was a task on his calendar, an inconvenient appointment he was obligated to attend. The man I had married, the one who had vowed to love me in sickness and in health, was gone. Or perhaps he was never really there, and I had just painted him into existence with my own hopes and dreams. The anesthesiologist came in, a cheerful man who explained the process in a calm, reassuring voice. He asked if I had any questions. I looked at Mark, hoping for a sign of connection, a squeeze of my hand, a look that said, "It's going to be okay." He just gave a curt nod to the doctor, his eyes already drifting back to the screen of his phone. As they began to wheel my gurney out of the room, my hand instinctively reached for his. His fingers barely brushed mine before he pulled away to adjust his tie. "I'll be here," he said, his tone dismissive. "Try to relax." The last thing I saw before the doors to the pre-op wing swung shut was my husband, already sitting back down, his face illuminated by the cold, blue light of his phone. And in that moment, the fear of the surgery was completely eclipsed by the terrifying, ice-cold certainty of my isolation. The anesthesia couldn't come fast enough. I awoke to a world made of gauze. My thoughts were thick and slow, like honey dripping in a cold room. A dull, throbbing pain radiated from my core, a constant, unwelcome reminder of the violation my body had endured. My throat was raw, and my eyelids felt as heavy as lead weights. I blinked, and the blurry shapes of the recovery room slowly sharpened into focus. Mark was there, standing by the window, his back to me. He was on the phone, his voice a low, irritated hum. "No, I told you I'm at the hospital," he was saying, his voice hushed but sharp. "It's done. Yes, she's fine. Look, I can't talk about this right now. I'll see you tonight. Okay, bye." He hung up and turned, his face a mask of weary impatience. He saw my open eyes and offered a smile that didn't come close to reaching them. "Hey, you're awake. How are you feeling?" "Thirsty," I rasped, my voice a dry crackle. He glanced around the room, spotted a plastic pitcher of water and a cup on the bedside table, but made no move to get it for me. "The nurse said the surgery went well. No complications. Dr. Evans already came by while you were sleeping." He checked his watch, a sleek silver timepiece that I had bought him for our 5th anniversary. She said they'll keep you overnight for observation, and you can be discharged tomorrow morning. We need to aim for 10 a.m. sharp. I have that big quarterly review meeting at noon, and I can't miss it. Every word was a small, sharp blow against my fragile state. He hadn't asked about my pain. He hadn't touched my hand. He hadn't even offered me the water I'd asked for. He was already planning his escape, coordinating his schedule around my recovery as if it were a delivery he had to sign for. I pushed myself up slightly, a groaning escaping my lips as the pain intensified. "Mark, could you please pass me the water?" With an exaggerated sigh, he finally picked up the pitcher and poured a small amount into the plastic cup. He handed it to me, his fingers brushing mine for a brief, cold second. As I took a tentative sip, the cool liquid a balm on my parched throat. He continued his logistical briefing. "I'll go home tonight to get some real sleep. The chair in here is a torture device," he said with a short, humorless laugh. "I'll come back to get you in the morning. Make sure you have all your prescriptions and discharge papers ready to go when I get here. I don't want to be hunting down nurses and waiting around." He was treating me like an incompetent employee he was managing through a project. There was no tenderness, no flicker of the man who had once held me all night when I had the flu, whispering silly jokes until I fell asleep. That man was a ghost, a figment of my memory. This man, this cold, efficient stranger, was my husband. "Okay, Mark," I whispered, too tired and too sore to argue. The anesthesia was wearing off, and in its place, a different kind of fog was settling in, a heavy, sorrowful haze. I was a burden, an obstacle, and he couldn't wait to be rid of me. He leaned down, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought he was going to kiss me. Instead, he just picked up his briefcase from the floor. "All right, I'll see you tomorrow then. Try to get some rest." He walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. I could hear his footsteps echoing down the polished linoleum hallway, quick and purposeful, the sound of a man hurrying away. I sank back against the starched pillow, the single sip of water doing nothing to quench the profound thirst in my soul. A single hot tear escaped and traced a path down my temple, disappearing into my hair. The next morning, the world felt painfully bright. The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor, the harsh sunlight glinting off the cars in the parking garage, it all seemed to assault my tired eyes. Every step was a careful, deliberate effort, a negotiation with the deep, pulling ache in my abdomen. I clutched a small pillow against my stomach, a trick Nurse Brenda had taught me, but it did little to ease the discomfort. Mark was exactly as he'd promised, punctual and impatient. He'd arrived at 9:59 a.m., tapped his foot while I signed the final discharge form, and rushed me into the wheelchair with a brisk, "All right, let's go, let's go." He didn't push the chair himself. A young volunteer did, while Mark walked a few paces ahead, already on the phone, confirming his attendance at his noon meeting. We finally reached my car, a modest but reliable sedan parked on the third level of the garage. The air was cool and smelled of concrete and exhaust fumes. The volunteer helped me stand, and I leaned heavily against the passenger door, fumbling in my purse for the keys. Mark ended his call with a sharp, "I'll be there in 20, bye." He turned to me, his face unreadable. "Give me the keys." "What? Why? I can unlock it," I said, my fingers finally closing around the familiar cool metal. "Just give them to me, Clara," he said, his voice flat. He held out his hand, palm up. Confused and weary, I dropped the keys into his waiting hand. He unlocked the doors with a chirp, but then, instead of opening the passenger side for me, he walked around to the driver's side and got in. He started the engine, the familiar rumble of my car sounding alien and threatening. I stood there, bewildered, my hands still on the cold metal of the door. "Mark, what are you doing?" He rolled down the window, his face now a mask of cold, hard resolve. The man I'd spent a decade with was gone, replaced by a stranger with cruel eyes. "I'm done, Clara," he said, the words hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "I'm done with all of this, with you, with your constant needs, your moods, your this." He gestured vaguely toward my body, toward the hospital behind us. "This surgery, this was the last straw. The cost, the drama, I'm just done." My mind reeled. It couldn't process the words. "Done? What are you talking about? You're going to leave me here? I just had major surgery, Mark." My voice was a panicked squeak. "You're a resourceful woman," he said with a chilling smirk. "You'll figure it out. Find your own way home." His eyes flickered with something ugly, a contempt that had clearly been simmering for years. "Our marriage is over. I'll have my lawyer send your lawyer the papers. Oh, wait." He laughed a short, barking sound. "You don't have a lawyer. You don't have anything. I guess I'll just send them to the house. A house you'll need to be out of by the end of the month." He held up my car keys, dangling them from his finger for a moment before pocketing them. "I'll take the car for now. Consider it a down payment on all the trouble you've caused me." And with that, he put the car in reverse. I stumbled back as he pulled out of the space, the tires squealing in protest. He didn't even look at me as he sped down the ramp and out of sight. I was left standing alone in the echoing silence of the concrete garage. The pillow I'd been clutching fell to the ground. The pain in my abdomen flared, sharp and blinding. But it was nothing compared to the catastrophic agony that ripped through my heart. He had waited until I was at my most broken, my most vulnerable, and then he had shattered me completely. My whole world, the one I had so carefully built around him, had just ceased to exist. Time seemed to warp in the gray, concrete expanse of the parking garage. One second I was watching the tail lights of my own car disappear, and the next I was leaning against a cold support pillar, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. The shock was a physical entity, a block of ice forming in my chest while waves of nausea and pain crashed against it. My legs trembled violently, threatening to give out. How was I supposed to get home? I had no car, my house was no longer my own, and the man I'd given my life to had just discarded me like trash. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking so hard I could barely unlock it. Who could I even call? A taxi? An Uber? The thought of explaining my situation to a stranger, of having to move, to direct them, felt like an insurmountable task. The world had tilted on its axis, and I was sliding off. Just as a sob finally broke free, a strangled, desperate sound, a vehicle pulled silently into the lane in front of me. It wasn't a taxi. It was a car unlike any I had ever seen up close. It was a long, sleek, black sedan, polished to a mirror shine, so dark it seemed to absorb the light around it. It moved with a quiet, powerful grace that was utterly at odds with the grimy surroundings. It stopped directly in front of me, its engine a barely perceptible hum. I stared, frozen, my personal tragedy momentarily forgotten in the face of this surreal intrusion. Was this a mistake? Had they confused me for someone else? Then the rear passenger window slid down with a silent electric whisper. Inside sat a man in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit. He had silver hair combed neatly back from his forehead and intelligent eyes behind a pair of wire-rimmed glasses. He looked to be in his late 60s, and his expression was one of calm, professional sympathy. He wasn't smiling, but there was a kindness in his gaze that I hadn't seen in years. "Mrs. Clara Sterling?" he asked, his voice calm and resonant. I could only nod, my throat tight with unshed tears. "My name is Arthur Davies," he said, extending a business card toward me. I am an attorney representing the estate of your maternal grandfather, Mr. Alistair Astor. Please, allow us to give you a ride." The name, Alistair Astor, hit me like a thunderclap. My grandfather, the man I hadn't spoken to since I was 19. The world which had just stopped suddenly lurched into a new, bewildering motion. My mind struggled to connect the dots. My grandfather? An attorney? This car? Here? Now? I don't understand, I stammered, my voice cracking. "I know this is a great deal to process, Mrs. Sterling," Mr. Davy said, his voice gentle but firm. "Everything will be explained, but first, you are in no condition to be standing here. You've just been through a significant ordeal." He nodded to the driver, and the rear door opened with a soft click. "Please, let us take you somewhere safe." A wave of dizziness washed over me. The stark reality of my situation, abandoned, in pain, in a parking garage, collided with the impossible fantasy of this moment. My choices were to stand here and crumble, or to get into the car. There was no real choice at all. Leaning on the door for support, I slowly, painfully, lowered myself onto the plush leather seat. The interior of the car smelled of leather and wood polish. The door closed with a heavy, satisfying thud, sealing out the cold, harsh world of the garage and encasing me in a cocoon of quiet luxury. As the car pulled away smoothly, my whole world, the one that had just been destroyed, didn't just stop. It was being replaced. The ride was so smooth, it felt like floating. The city slid past the tinted windows in a blur of muted colors and silent motion. I sat sunken into the soft leather, the initial shock giving way to 1,000 frantic questions that buzzed in my head like a trapped hornet. Beside me, Mr. Davies remained silent for a few moments, as if giving me time to simply breathe. Finally, he turned to me, his expression still one of measured calm. "Clara, if I may call you that, I understand you are overwhelmed. Let me try to explain as simply as possible." I nodded, clutching the smooth leather of the seat like a lifeline. "Your grandfather, Alistair, has been trying to reconnect with you for some time," he began. "After your father passed away a few years ago, he felt the estrangement had gone on long enough. He deeply regretted the lost years. However, his initial attempts to reach out were intercepted." "Intercepted?" I asked, my voice thin. "By who?" "By your husband," Mr. Davies said gently. "Mark made it quite clear that you wanted no contact. He returned letters unopened and blocked your grandfather's calls. Alistair, being a man of significant resources, became suspicious. He hired a private investigator." The hornet in my head stilled. A private investigator? The thought was chilling and, in a strange way, validating. All the little slights, the coldness, the resentment from Mark. It wasn't just in my head. It was real enough for a stranger to document. "The investigator's report was comprehensive," Mr. Davies continued, his tone carefully neutral. "It painted a clear picture of your marriage, Mark's financial opportunism, and his emotional neglect. When Alistair learned of your upcoming surgery, he feared Mark might use your period of vulnerability to his advantage. He predicted, with unfortunate accuracy, that your husband's character would reveal itself most clearly when you were at your weakest." Tears began to stream silently down my face. They weren't tears of sorrow for losing Mark, but tears of relief. The last 10 years of my life, a decade I'd spent blaming myself, was being reframed in the matter of minutes. I wasn't difficult. I was being controlled. I wasn't a burden. I was being used. "This morning's events were the final, regrettable confirmation," the lawyer said. "We had a team observing the hospital. We saw everything." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim, brand-new smartphone, still in its plastic wrapping, and a single ornate silver key. He placed them on the seat between us. "This is for you," he said. "The phone is new, secure, and already active. The key is to your new residence. Your grandfather purchased a condominium for you downtown. It's fully furnished and stocked. Your only concern right now should be your recovery." He then pulled out a thick manila folder and laid it on top of the phone. "And these," he said, his voice turning colder, more businesslike, "are the divorce papers. They have been prepared for some time. I believe you will find the terms favorable." He opened the folder. My eyes scanned the top page. It was a petition for divorce citing emotional cruelty and abandonment, but it was the financial disclosures that made my breath catch. The house I thought was ours was in fact purchased with a significant down payment from a trust my mother had left me, a trust Mark had convinced me was a simple inheritance we had spent years ago. He had managed the account, and I, in my trusting ignorance, had never questioned it. The cars, the investments, almost everything of value was tied to that initial capital. Mark has no idea about the trust's true origins or its legal structure. He believes it's marital property. It is not. It is and has always been yours alone. He has effectively been living off your money while making you feel guilty for every penny. The world had stopped, and then it had been replaced. Now it was being rebuilt, stronger and on a foundation of truth. The pain in my abdomen was still there, a dull ache, but a new feeling was rising to meet it, a cold, hard, and utterly liberating anger. An hour later, I was no longer the broken woman from the parking garage. After being shown to my new home, a stunning apartment with panoramic views of the city skyline, a small, efficient team that Mr. Davies had on standby had helped me. I was bathed, given a mild pain reliever that took the edge off the surgical soreness, and dressed in an elegant but comfortable cashmere pantsuit that had been waiting in the closet. Looking in the mirror, I saw a stranger. Her eyes were tired but clear, her posture was straight, and her expression was one of stoic determination. She looked like an Astor. Mr. Davies had explained the final step of the plan. Mark's big meeting was a presentation to the firm's senior partners, a desperate bid for a promotion he felt he was long overdue. It was his moment to shine, to project the image of success and control he so carefully curated. It was the perfect stage for his downfall. We rode the silent elevator up to the 40th floor of a gleaming glass tower. When the doors opened, we stepped into a hushed, opulent reception area. Through a set of large glass doors, I could see a boardroom. Mark was standing at the head of the long, polished table, mid-sentence, gesturing at a projection on the wall. He looked confident, powerful, every inch the man he pretended to be. His boss, a severe-looking man named Mr. Harrington, sat at the table, watching him intently. Mr. Davies didn't knock. He simply opened the door and stepped inside. I followed a half step behind him, my heart pounding a steady, resolute rhythm against my ribs. The entire room fell silent. All eyes turned to us. Mark froze, his mouth slightly agape. His face, a mask of confident ambition a second ago, cycled through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, then irritation, then dawning, horrified recognition as his eyes landed on me. He saw not the weak, crying victim he had abandoned, but a composed woman flanked by a man who radiated authority. "Excuse the interruption, gentlemen," Mr. Davies said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of command. "I am Arthur Davies, counsel for Mrs. Clara Sterling. We have a time-sensitive legal matter to discuss with Mr. Mark Sterling." Mark's face went white. "What is this, Clara? What are you doing here? This is my quarterly review. he hissed, his voice a choked whisper. Mr. Harrington, the boss, looked from Mark to us, his brow furrowed. Mark, who are these people? Ignoring them both, Mr. Davies walked calmly to the table and placed the thick manila folder directly in front of Mark's meticulously arranged notes. Mr. Sterling, you are hereby served with a petition for divorce, he announced to the silent room. Mark stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. Mr. Davies continued, his voice crisp and clear. The petition cites spousal abandonment and emotional cruelty, specifically your actions this morning, leaving your wife stranded and in medical distress in a hospital parking garage, an act, I might add, that we have on video. A collective gasp went through the room. Mark looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Furthermore, Mr. Davies said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming even more devastating, this petition includes a full financial injunction. As of this moment, you're blocked from accessing any and all assets tied to the Astor Trust, which you have been fraudulently managing. This includes the house you currently reside in, the vehicles you drive, and the investment accounts you control. To be clear, Mr. Sterling, everything you believe to be yours is, in fact, my client's separate inherited property. You will vacate the premises within 48 hours. Mark finally found his voice, a pathetic, strangled sound. That's not true. That's our money. For the first time, I spoke. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a razor. No, Mark. It was always my money. You just made me forget that. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a desperate, pleading panic. The smug, cruel man was gone, replaced by a terrified boy who had just been caught. He looked at his boss, Mr. Harrington, whose face was now a thundercloud of disapproval. In that single, silent, public moment, Mark's entire world, his carefully constructed facade of success, his career, his future, crumbled into dust at his feet. The late afternoon sun cast long, golden stripes across the polished hardwood floor of my new living room. The silence here was different from the silence in the house I had shared with Mark. That silence had been heavy, fraught with unspoken words and anxieties. This silence was light, peaceful, and filled with promise. It was the sound of a blank page. From my place on the soft, cream-colored sofa, I could see the city stretching out below me, a glittering tapestry of lights just beginning to awaken as dusk fell. A cup of jasmine tea, fragrant and warm, sat on the marble coaster beside me. The dull ache from my surgery was still there, a faint echo, but the crushing weight on my soul had lifted completely. Mr. Davies had dropped me off an hour ago after the spectacular implosion at Mark's office. He had simply said, "Rest, Clara. The rest is just paperwork." I had a feeling Mark's professional and personal ruin would be swift and absolute. Men like Mr. Harrington did not tolerate scandal, especially when it involved such profound moral failure. My new phone, the one Mr. Davies had given me, buzzed softly on the cushion next to me. I picked it up. A text message from an unknown number glowed on the screen. "Dearest Clara, Arthur informed me of today's events. I am deeply sorry for what you endured, but so incredibly proud of the strength you've shown. I know it has been a long time, but I hope you will let your old grandfather back into your life. Welcome home. Alistair." A tear, one of pure, unadulterated joy, slipped down my cheek. I typed back a simple reply. "Thank you. I'd like that very much." I thought back to the man in the parking garage, the one who had looked at me with such contempt, believing he was leaving me with nothing. In his greed and cruelty, he had completely miscalculated. He thought my value was tied to him. He thought my weakness was his opportunity. He never understood that my real strength and my true inheritance had been dormant all along, waiting for a reason to awaken. He had tried to leave me stranded, to find my own way home. And in the end, that is exactly what I did. I had found my way to a home I never knew existed, to a family I thought I had lost, and back to a version of myself I thought was gone forever. As the city lights twinkled to life one by one, I took a slow, deep breath. For the first time in a decade, I felt completely and utterly free. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that my whole world hadn't stopped at all. It had just begun.